Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Pilar, and we're going to be talking about unlocking emotions in the corporate world, which I think for a lot of people is a really important subject, because corporate life has changed, it's evolved, and we need to, as if we're going to be the best people that we can be, we need to be the best people that we can be. So before we get into it, Pella, tell people where they can get hold of you.
Thanks, Tim. Pilar Majerovic, and you can find me on my website, so pilarmajerovic.com, and otherwise on LinkedIn. So maybe we can add my family name somewhere, Tim, so that it makes the spelling easier. Or if you search for Pilar Cabral, Cabril, you will find I have two double names, so you'll be able to find me on LinkedIn.
It's MAGEROVIC.
J, J, J.
I thought it was a J. Yeah,
J,
sorry.
J, J.
It's it's
There you
that,
go.
isn't it?
Yeah, .com for the site, and you can find me on LinkedIn under the same
Okay.
name.
So you've got an interesting background because you've never done the same thing really through your life. You've gone and you've reinvented yourself. You're a journalist. You moved to Croatia. Then you went into corporate sales. So in a way, you've forced yourself out of your comfort zone and to do different things. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so coming out of the comfort zone, and it was done a little bit by chance. And so I've embraced situations, let's say, and life has brought me to these situations. So, as you said, I started my career in journalism at Euronews, and then that brought me to Croatia, where I met my to be husband, which is now my husband. And here I had to reinvent myself for the first bigger time because I came to a country where I didn't speak the language. I couldn't work here as a journalist. And so it was about really starting from scratch. But just with the fact that I was 28 years old at the time. So it was stepping into the unknown, and the unknown brought me to the corporate world. And in the corporate world, I found that I was really enjoying sales. And so I made a career for some time in sales, both in telecommunications and in the hospitality industry. And after that, at some point, again, circumstances of life in business brought me into coaching. So I had the opportunity to work with a coach for myself to kind of find out what's my next step. And from there, I had that aha moment is like, that is what I want to do because I can be in the corporate world from the outside, meaning working with very different industries. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 6 years or so.
I did wonder why you moved to Croatia. And it's lovely that you did that. You
There
went
you
for
go.
love. I thought that was
One of the important emotions, right?
yes, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. A very logical emotion. Yes.
There you go. The
Uh,
logical one.
and so you've made a number of those steps, and I like I'm like you. I like the fact that I can walk into the corporate world and then walk out and close the
Mm.
door and let people get to their politics and stuff. Um, so would you say that you were comfortable with change, or how did you, or are you comfortable with change, or how do you get comfortable with change? Or do you ever get comfortable with change?
Yeah, and that's a really good question because I actually, when I started thinking about change a bit more, and especially in the world we live in now, I think we can all agree that it's really fast moving, changing this VUCA world.
Hmm.
But if we rewind a little bit, I think that I have actually always been in change. So since I'm a kid, we were traveling and moving a lot with my parents due to my father's work. So I think that I have been basically wired in a way that for me, change is a natural thing. And in my experience through change, I think I've actually always chosen to look at what did I get from that change? What's the benefit? Because yes, of course, you leave things behind and there are unknown things when you move and you change places. But I somehow think that I got much more out of it than it has burdened me or been a handicap in my own life.
I've worked all my career in tech, and every year there would be a reorganization, and you just got used to the fact that there was always going to be. But that may be an exception for me, because there's a lot of people that aren't used to change.
Mm. Yeah, and again, I think that change is simply, it's also a state of mind. So if you enter it with the acceptance and with curiosity, you can probably go through it in a more comfortable way, so to say. In corporate, when you're already connecting it to the corporate, there's often a resistance because people don't know what's going to happen. So they're more in discomfort with the unknown than with the change itself. So they've kind of made it an equal, right? Change means it's unknown. And yes, there's part of it that's unknown, but there are bits and pieces that we can put together to make it maybe probably less overwhelming for people to go through.
And is that being comfortable with not knowing? Because I know when I worked in corporate, probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would give to people that had come from smaller companies was, you could never know everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control everything. So you'll suddenly go in a meeting and say, I didn't know that. But you have to kind of, that's what it is.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is to be okay with the fact that we can't control it. We can't control everything. We can't know everything. And there's actually also a beauty in the unknown and the unexpected. So if we enter it without, just being curious for a start and aiming for, well, if there's one thing I could be leaving with that I'd really like to feel, well, what would that be?
Mm.
And that's already entering it with another perspective rather than the resisting.
Yes, because I mean, if we take the common feeling of the fixed mindset or open mindset, and an open mindset being one of kind of acceptance, a certain curiosity, and the fact that you can't control everything. I think that we're understanding that we have to be more like that in the world, rather than actually being fixed in the way that in the way that we are, because we feel comfortable because of that fixed.
Yeah, the with the open mindset, there it's a growth mindset, right? So if we agree that there's always something to learn and that there's always something new to experience and that there's always something out there that we didn't even know existed and that we can be curious about and that can help us at the end of the day become happier or better people, why not embrace that?
Mm. You've talked about curiosity a number of times. How is it that we can be more curious, or if we're not necessarily naturally curious?
Well, curiosity is about just wondering. So if when you were sharing, this fixed mindset, open mindset, growth mindset. So if I were to be curious in a sense of awakening curiosity in people, is by asking them what is it maybe that they don't know about the situation? What is it that they'd like to find out about the person? What is it that they have never thought about? And something else is immediately related to the less cognitive part, is more about connecting to the feeling. So what do you feel in those situations? And that often, for some people, is an odd question because they're more asked to think about something rather than to feel something or even to share what
Yes.
they feel. So curiosity for people who feel that they aren't curious or they don't know how to go about curiosity, I would invite them to tap into their feelings and to be curious about what triggers that specific feeling or emotion in a given situation.
Right. Is that, and if we're getting towards more of the conversation in terms of, unlocking emotions in the corporate world, is that more about, because in corporate, what tends to happen is that everything's based on fact, we're the number one, and really, we don't really tend to focus on emotion or how we feel. It is about, we're going to reorganize and just get with the plan, Tim. So how can we sort of like start feeling in the corporate world and getting people to understand that?
Yeah, so I'd like to maybe start off with giving ourselves permission. So at least if we take it from there, then we have space, right? So if we start with saying that it's okay to feel, because we do feel as human beings, we all feel. Now, are we good at naming what we feel? That probably less.
Mm.
But I think we will not be able to argue around the fact that we all do feel things.
Yes.
And then in the corporate, there's a lot of, there's a lot of baggage. We're carrying stuff from long time ago, and it starts often, if you think about it, with little boys. I don't know if you were personally told,
I was a little boy,
don't cry,
amazingly enough.
boys don't cry, be a big boy,
Yeah.
be strong, and so on.
Be
So
brave. Yeah.
yeah, and so when we start hearing those things from when we're really small, it enters the system, and the brain is wired to remember those things. And so there's a natural resistance, potentially, right, in boys, in men, to cry and to show their emotions from that perspective. So when we put a bit more of the intention around being okay with emotions, accepting emotions, it creates a very different corporate culture, team culture, or even at a company level. So it's about being able to speak to what we feel, to speak to what we're feeling is happening in the team or in the company. And that is basically giving space for what I call more meaningful conversations. So it's not about getting, rid of the intellect and of the data. We all do need that. And at the same time, I often ask people in the corporate, how often do you have a gut feeling? And how often do you follow that gut feeling? And the funny thing is that people recognize that they have a gut feeling, but they suppress it. They will go with what numbers will say, or what a procedure will say, or what a has to says. And then time goes by and they realize that they actually did have the first good intention, intuition. They just didn't stick to it. So it's in the science, it's proven, and it's out there. There's a lot of research on the topic that we actually do have three brains. So we have the intellect, we have the gut, which is the intuition, and we have our heart, right? And ideally, we would want to be aligned. And so how often do you have in the corporate world people who rationally feel something, but emotionally are disconnected? And a lot of the work that I try to bring into the corporate world is to find that alignment, so that people are healthier physically, mentally, that they are happier, and that we simply speak to the whole we, and not just to part of it, which would be the brain.
Because I've been through lots of reorganizations, and I think that the number one thing that everyone felt whenever there was a reorganization was they were scared. But nobody said that. There was very much presentation. This is the way we're going to be organized this year. Right, off you go and execute. And everybody would walk out the room, and no one would look at each other. because everybody was scared, and they're saying, do we have a, there was a joke about whether we had a chair or not. It would be a bit like the game, where they take chairs away from and the music would stop and someone wouldn't have a chair. But no one discussed the fact that the emotion that they were scared, and no one addressed it as well, even though it was very obvious. You could smell it in the room.
Yeah, that's what you say, the smelling, the picking up. We can feel the energy, right? And I'm just curious, had they said the same thing in communicating, the what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, how it's going to happen, and then to give a space for people to share how they feel about it.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like a rocket science thing to do, right? And at the same time, it's a step that is often not even on the charts. So even if it would come from the CEO, so if we're talking about going top down, there might be a reorganization. It might have to happen. And at the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean that the CEO is comfortable with it. He might also be sad. He might also have a lot of stress with maybe having to fire a certain number of people. And what about him? Where does
For
he
her.
have the space to express, he or she, right? What they're going through. And so the easiest thing to do is to hide, to kind of park it, and to pretend that there are no emotions connected to it.
So
And
how
the
do
truth
we?
is that's not going to happen.
So how
Emotions
do
are
we?
there.
I mean, we can talk about emotions like happy, sad, angry, scared, but what should we be naming? How can we actually name? When if my partner puts a hand on my shoulder and say, "How are you? What's up with Tim?" and I say, "And I'm feeling like this today." What should we be saying? Is there like a new vocabulary or something?
Well, first, I think it's about going and being curious again about how many emotions can we name. So if you would ask the average probably person, they can name between 5 and 6 emotions, and that's about it. Because also in our systems, here in Europe at least, and in the States, based on what I know, we are not taught about emotions. There's no emotional literacy in courses, at least in any of the ones I've taken, and most of the people I've been surrounded with. People feel rather handicapped by the fact that they don't even know how to express. So we kind of feel something, we kind of sometimes are able to name the description of the feeling, and then that's about it. And sometimes we also think that we know what the other person feels without even having asked, because somebody can look angry, but that might be fury for somebody else, right? So it's these assumptions that we carry are also coming from labeling, right? And that's maybe what's getting in the way. So one of the things that can be done is to start, being interested in the topic, and being having this connection with oneself for a start. So it might be about journaling, it might be about just naming out loud, because we go through a tons of emotions all day long. There are only a couple that we remember because those are the ones that hit us, but we are always in an emotion. An emotion is not a good or a bad thing. An emotion is a state, right? It's there, and it is triggered by something. And the good news is that if we know what triggers us, then we can actually choose to do something about it. So if I have a tendency to be what we call negatively triggered, if I can sort out what triggers me to feel that anger or that frustration, I can try and start becoming more aware of the trigger, and then to readjust the behavior related to that.
Yeah. And you talk about creating space for the energy and for conversations. It's also important to talk about these things, isn't it?
Absolutely. So it's, if you, let's say an example that happens a lot is, when we ask people, how are you?
Yes,
It's a bit pro forma, right?
it is.
So
Yes.
yeah, I'm good, I'm great. Oh, that's okay. No, no, no. Now, if we would really pick up, so if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody and, if they tell me, oh, I'm great. Well, that for a start, the verbal connection and the physical connection doesn't look like really great to me. And so if I would actually pause and take some time to say, I didn't get that feeling. I'm just wondering what's actually really happening with you right now, right? And maybe that would be just a great opportunity for somebody who actually needs to share or wants to share something, but doesn't know where to start because they might have a story that they think nobody cares because we're just here at work to do what we need to do, and who cares about how I feel. Whereas if we were really able in team, for example, meetings, we may have these jour fixe sessions, and then we might have a check-in. And if we would really do a authentic check-in, so not the pro forma ticking the box, but really if we're a team of 10 and everybody would really share in a couple of sentences, what are they feeling? What's going on? And maybe what would they like to feel more of? And maybe what would they like to feel less of? We get a good sense of the emotional field.
Yeah.
And that's really important when we move on to the next step in terms of the business that we need to deliver.
Pilar, this is just it's a fascinating subject. It's something that I think all of us, we all need to get, we all need to come to work, and we all need to get better. And I think it's a fascinating subject and something that we all need to grapple with.
Yeah.
So remind people where they can get hold of you.
So my first name, last name, pilarmajerovic.com is my website, and otherwise find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active, and please do reach out. Mention that you were on the call. I'd love to hear from you and connect, and who knows, maybe we can exchange some emotions together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
coming
Tim,
on.
for having